Alright, what's up guys? So if you're like me and you just got done hunting season, you're ready for the next thing. The next thing is fishing. And I was getting ready to start the fishing season. You know, first thing, go through some tackle, see what you've got, see what you need to buy, and store everything in the garage. And in the garage things can get beat up. I noticed I had a rod tip broken. So I thought that was a perfect opportunity to show you guys how I fix my rod tips. So today I'm gonna show you two different types of broken tips and how you can fix those. Alright, so today we're gonna be fixing two different types of eyes. This one is just, as you can see, the little back piece came undone because the eye was pushed way forward, which isn't a big deal, so I don't have to completely replace the eye. We're just going to glue that back on and put some epoxy to fix that one. And then this is an old rod. The tip's actually not broken, but since the rod is broken, I'm just going to take the tip off and show you guys how you would fix it if it was broken. So let's get right into it. Alright, so this first one was bent forward, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and bend it back so we can seat the little back piece into the same spot as it was before without breaking it. A little bit more. Alright, that looks pretty good there. Alright, so the next thing is we're going to get some glue. This is just a stick of, it's almost like hot glue, but it's a little bit more, it's a little bit stronger, I guess. That's what you actually put inside. But I'm going to use it to glue it down, glue the two pieces of metal of my rod tip together, so then I can put a little bit of epoxy on it. You don't need much of this. Alright, so there we go. I don't know if you can see that little piece, but that's all we're doing. Then we're going to flip this here. Alright, so I just put a little bit of the glue under the broken piece. I don't know if you can see that little silver thing right here, but that's just a little bit of glue. You don't need very much, just enough to stick it on there. Now I'm just going to heat it up real quick with an alcohol burner that I have here and just lightly run it under, because you don't want to melt this epoxy that's holding the rod tip. It's holding the thread on to the rod tip. So I'm just going to flip it upside down. I'm going to take my alcohol burner. I'm just going to run it under there. Be careful not to do it too much. Only takes a couple seconds and you should see it start to bubble a little bit. Alright, now it's bubbling, so I'm going to move that out of the way. I'm just going to press it on there and hold it. Just going to hold that there for a couple of seconds until it really melts and sticks on, holds it together. Still a little bit. Alright, so that's about it. Now we're going to move on to putting some 2-part epoxy that you would see on the thread on all your rods. I'm going to put some of that on there, so just to make sure it stays on there, because that's good glue, but it won't hold it on the outside like the epoxy will. Alright, so now I'm going to get ready to put the epoxy on. This is just a UV rod wrapping finish here, 2-part epoxy. And I don't need very much, so I'm just putting it in a bottle cap. Usually if I was wrapping an entire rod, I would put it in a Dixie cup. If you can get the plastic Dixie cups, those work really well. But I don't need that much, so I'm just going with a bottle cap. I literally don't need barely any of this, so I just did 2 little ticks on my syringe thing, and you just put this in the bottle cap, equal parts. Make sure it's the same amount of each, and then stir it up real quick, and then it'll be good to go. One, two. I'm gonna put a little bit more hardener, just to be sure. And now we're going to mix that together, brush it on, and I have this hooked up to my rod building roller to make sure it applies evenly. You don't need to do this. I would spin it a little bit. If you're doing this at home, I would spin it a little bit, but you don't need to do very much since it's just the rod tip. Now I'm going to turn the spinner on. Now it's rolling, and now you just apply it. Make sure you apply an even coat. You don't need very much. Make sure it's just even all around the piece. And you can just use any 2-part epoxy. Anything will really work. Doesn't have to be special rod building stuff. But if you have it, then I would recommend using it. Alright, so that's pretty good there. And now the last thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pull out that alcohol burner. A lighter works just as well, but since I have the burner, I guess I'll use it. And I'm just going to want to run this under it a little bit. Again, not very, don't hold it there. Make sure you're just going back and forth this way, because it'll get all the bubbles out, and make sure it applies evenly. By heating it up, it'll just make it kind of runny, get all the bubbles out. See, it's dripping a little bit. So we don't want it all to drip away, like you would want all the excess to drip off on a regular eye that you built. But since this one is just the repairing the tip, we don't need to worry about it. So that's about it. Then if you didn't have a ruler, you could just kind of make sure you don't have very much, and make sure it's parallel, because you don't want that. You want that to drip down. You don't want it to run down your actual blank. or your rod. So I'm just going to let that sit for 24 hours, and after 24 hours I'm going to check it, make sure it's hard, then I'm going to turn off the spinner and you're going to be good to go. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about, the next type of fix is, say this tip was broken and you had to completely take it off and replace it with a new one. You can get these tip building kits with extra tips and the glue that you saw earlier anywhere. They have them at Dick's and Walmart. I think I got mine at Amazon, but it'll come with that glue. It'll come with this glue and then 3 spare tips, different sizes, whichever fits your blank. But what we're going to do now is we're going to take the razor blade, because we have to take this tip completely off. Once we get it off, we apply some more of this glue and then just slide the new one back on. So the first thing we're going to do is you take a razor blade, and be careful because they're really sharp, but you just slowly and lightly cut that epoxy away from the end of the metal piece. Be careful not to go into the actual rod. So then once you cut all the way around it, there should be a little slice all the way around. We're going to get that alcohol burner back out, and we're just going to heat up the inside of this right like that, and it'll warm up the metal, causing the glue, this glue that's inside of there, to melt, and then we'll be able to pull it right off. So let's just hold it up here, and I'm just going to keep rotating it because we don't want to melt our epoxy like that. You don't want to do that. See, and then it just slides right out. Once it gets nice and warm, it'll just pop right out, no problem. Just pull it with a pair of pliers because it'll be hot. And that's about it for taking it off. Now you can peel this away if you want to, but as long as you're more careful than I was with the heat, then you won't need to. But this is just an old broken rod, so I wasn't really worried about it. Just gonna throw it in there. Make sure you're very careful about touching the metal eyes when you're heating them up, because you might only think, oh, it was only under there for a second. That metal is so thin, it gets really hot really quick and you will burn yourself. So make sure you're using pliers if you're going to touch it. Okay, this is the same stuff you saw earlier. I'm just going to cut off a really thin piece. It's basically as thin as I can get it. And then cut it to where, I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but cut it into a small rectangle to where it will actually fit down into the little hole there. And you don't need very much of it, but I like to fill up the tube most of the way, because you'll have some run out the end, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. Now that's a lot of glue in there. There's only 2 little slices, but now I'm going to hold it with my pliers, and then I'm going to bring the alcohol burner back over. Now I'm going to heat up this eye again to where I'm going to melt that glue and then just slide this right back on. This is the same eye that I was acting like was broken, but since it's an old rod, I don't want to put a new eye on it because that would just be wasting. So now I'm just going to heat that glue up. Does not take much. Just heat that glue up that's in there, and then you just slide it right on. Okay, that didn't work. Alright, I'm going to heat it up again. Alright, so now I heated it up, it's ready to go. Now it's on. Be careful because it's hot. Now I put a little bit of masking tape on it, so I'm just going to cut that masking tape off real quick because I was messing with it off camera and accidentally made it fray at the tip, so I had to keep it together. So alright, so now that rod tip is done. Looks pretty good. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's on there. And then if we wanted to, we could take some more of that 2-part epoxy and put it around here just to seal that little gap back up, but I'm not going to, since I'm just going to end up throwing this. I'm going to end up taking the eyes off for pieces, and then I'm just going to throw the rod blanket away, so I'm not going to do much work to it. But that's about it. You just have to heat it up. Cut the collar first, heat it up. You can take it right off. Grab your new one. I just use the same one, but grab a new one. Put a little bit of your glue in it. And once you have your glue in there, you just heat it up again and slide it right on. Make sure it's lined up perfect. And then once it's lined up perfect, you're good to go. And you can put a little bit more 2-part epoxy on there if you want. Don't have to, it's not a big deal, but just makes it look nicer. But that's about it. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I hope this helps you out if you've got broken rod tips. Be sure to like and subscribe, because we're going to be doing more rod building, rod repairs in the future. We're going to be looking at how to repair these eyes pretty soon. It's a lot more difficult, but I hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for the next one.